we left off in Swami Dayananda, the guru of the author, Swami Tadatmananda, discussing a metaphor about the nature of consciousness as a witness of a movie. We had ended just before we got to the next level of the analogy. Ah, said Swami Dayananda, delighting in Richard's observation. Now you are ready for the next step. There is another issue we have not yet considered. The problem of identification. Let me explain. When you watch a movie, you naturally get involved in the plot and become identified with the characters, sometimes with one of them in particular. When you identify with the characters, your feelings get affected by whatever happens to them. You begin to vicariously experience their lives. This is what I mean by identification. Now imagine you are in the theater watching the first film, a romantic tragedy. As the story unfolds, a heartbroken man, overcome with longing for a girl he loves but cannot have, becomes so depressed that he considers taking his own life. How would you feel while watching this? Sad, I suppose. Very sad, Richard replied. Now imagine watching the second film in which a woman is about to be attacked by a vicious murderer lurking in the shadows. How would you feel then? Terrified, probably. And if that character is cruelly strangled to death, what happens to you as you sit in the theater? Nothing, really. Oh, first you feel sad, later you feel terrified, and yet you admit that nothing really happens to you. That is amazing. In each movie, you can undergo all these experiences without truly being affected at all. That is what happens when you identify with a character. The same kind of identification is taking place right now in your waking state experience. The character, Richard, or Doom Knight, Brady Boy, Amanda McCormack, Treenan, is a person with certain color skin, certain color eyes, and an intelligent mind. They have a history, a personality, and is currently cast in the role of an audience member in this Sangha. But that person is just a character. They are not you. You are actually the consciousness by whom your thoughts are known. You are the awareful witness of this character's innermost feelings, their history, and their personality. As a conscious person, you are independent of that character, but you have become identified with them, like you have become identified with characters in a movie. In spite of being the awareful witness of events taking place right now, you feel they are actually happening to you, the conscious observer. But in reality, the conscious observer remains independent, unaffected. This kind of identification happens to everyone. Really speaking, it is not a problem at all, but it becomes a problem when you take the identification as being real. I am not sure I understand, said Richard. Swami Dayananda explained. In a movie, there is no harm in becoming identified with the characters. In fact, you would not enjoy the movie if you don't get deeply involved in it. But in a movie, you don't take the identification seriously. Even when you are totally absorbed in the plot and strongly identified with a particular character, you still know it is only a movie. You never take the identification as being real. If someone did so, they would leave the theater still believing they were the character and in dire need of psychiatric care at that. Psychiatric care. After our laughter subsided, Swami Dayananda continued. Most people take their identification with their bodies, minds, and personalities as being absolutely real. And because of this error, they suffer greatly whenever something undesirable happens to them. Those who are enlightened do not make this mistake. They never take their identification seriously. They know that no experience can truly threaten them, any more than a moviegoer can be threatened by events on the screen. So they can enjoy every scene in the drama of real life. They can enjoy all the ups and downs, even the unpleasant scenes, the struggles and difficulties of life. Even the difficulties? Richard echoed. Sure, why not? You can enjoy a sad movie, can't you? In the same way, an enlightened person can enjoy a sad or difficult moment of life. Richard's wrinkled forehead revealed his puzzlement. Do you mean that an enlightened person can experience sadness? Certainly, Swami Dayananda affirmed. Sadness is a normal human emotion. To be incapable of experiencing sadness would be inhuman, would it not? Suppose an enlightened person was told that their dear friend of the past 20 years had just been killed in a terrible automobile accident. How do you think they would react? Can you imagine such a person being indifferent? No, of course not. They would most definitely feel sad. But then their sadness would be different than the sadness you experience. Their sadness would be free from suffering. How can you be sad without suffering? Asked Richard. When you feel sad, sadness seems to permeate your consciousness and penetrate to the core of your being. It feels as if your very nature has become sad. And you cannot comfortably accept being sad, therefore you suffer. In a sad movie, you accept the sadness. In fact, you enthusiastically embrace it. Instead of suffering, you actually enjoy the sad drama. In this way, enlightened persons can accept sadness without suffering. Since they know it doesn't truly affect them, they can even enjoy their sadness. Without Vedantic wisdom, you cannot accept sadness. You cannot tolerate its presence and won't be content until it ceases. In the presence of sadness, you find yourself and your situation to be unacceptable. And such non-acceptance is the root of all suffering. Non-acceptance drives you to struggle against the reality of the moment. It turns reality into your enemy. This futile struggle with reality is nothing but suffering, the suffering of samsara, worldly life. Fortunately, life can be free from such suffering. Suppose you recognize that sadness is an experience like any other. All experiences, including sadness, come and go. Oh, vibrating phone. All experiences, including sadness, come and go, but you are the awareful witness to them all, and as the awareful witness, you are not truly affected by them. You might feel sad, but you, the conscious person aware of sadness in your mind, do not actually become sad. Sadness cannot affect your true self, Atma. And this is not a matter for belief. It has to be discovered. And when you recognize this truth, you will never again judge yourself to be unacceptable, even in the presence of sadness. Nor will you judge any situation to be unacceptable. Instead, you will unconditionally accept the reality of every moment. Richard asked, wouldn't unconditional acceptance lead to passivity? Should we not address the problems that cause sadness and try to resolve them? Of course we should, Swami Dayananda replied. We must address our problems and strive to change whatever can be changed. Passivity is never an option. Please understand that unconditional acceptance never leads to passivity. Acceptance of a situation implies that you also accept your responsibility to act appropriately. Sometimes we fail to carry out our duties because we find the necessary actions unpleasant or too difficult. So non-acceptance can sometimes prevent us from fulfilling our obligations. Unconditional acceptance gives us the freedom to do what must be done without being handicapped by our likes and dislikes. Those who are enlightened enjoy the freedom to embrace the reality of every moment, whether it is happy or sad. They are free to respond as each situation requires. With this freedom, a moment of sadness could become like the darkness of a passing cloud that briefly obscures the sun. The cloud soon moves on, uncovering the sun's dazzling splendor. Yet even in the cloud's presence, the sun itself continues to shine, utterly unaffected by even the darkest clouds. In the same way, the fullness that is your true nature is never affected, even in the presence of sadness. Those who have discovered this truth enjoy every moment, even the sad ones. After all, a life without sadness would be dull and insipid, don't you think? It would be like a movie without a plot, dreadfully boring. As we laughed, Swami Dayananda rose to his feet, indicating the end of satsang. After he withdrew into his cottage, the others trickled away from the porch. I approached Richard and said, "You certainly were full of questions tonight. Were they answered to your satisfaction?" "Most of them," he replied with a smile. "But leave it to a Swami to say that life without sadness would be boring." We stepped away from the porch into the surrounding darkness. Richard seemed like he was still bursting with questions and asked if we could talk for a while. The evening had grown too cool for sitting on the benches. A chill wind was blowing down from the mountains, as it often did on winter nights. I suggested that we go up to my room. Richard readily agreed. And let us pause our reading there for tonight. Later on we may continue and listen to the discussion between Mark, the author, before he became known as Swami Tadatmananda, and his curious British friend, Richard. Thank you for listening, everyone. Allow me to minimize the cover and extend my gratitude